Welcome to the Wisdom Check by Tabletop to Keyboard. This is going to be our bi-weekly podcast where we discuss things such as Dungeons and Dragons. Actually, I think maybe we need to turn up my mic a little bit, guys. How about some more game?
More game. This is so much shit. This is the intro to end all intros. Talk about Dungeons, Dragons, and
Now, I don't think that's proper. This is a family show after all. This is the intro we can use, fellas. It's good, clean fun for everyone. Welcome to the Wisdom Check, where we have wholesome conversations about the dilemmas we face every day.
Nah, hold on a second. I got your intro right here. Yeah, that's better. Welcome to the Wisdom Check. When I'm right, Jeff's wrong, we're going to have guests on to talk about it. It's going to be awesome. Because I said so.
He is right. He did say so. I don't know. Is surf music the best music for a podcast about D&D?
Fuck yeah.
Okay.
This just in, nobody can agree on our intro for this podcast. So we're just going to start. Welcome to the Wisdom Check. Roll for initiative. Fuck. A 1. It's like every time.
Hey, welcome everybody to the Wisdom Check. Tonight, we are joined by Travis Legge, and he is the line developer for Onyx Path Publishing's Scarred Lands. And welcome to the show. As always, I'm joined here by my co-host, Dustin.
What, everybody?
And I am, of course, Jeff. So nice having everyone here. Thanks for the chat be already going. It's great to see y'all. And we're going to kind of at least say hello to you, get you to say hi back for us here.
Before we get started, we just received a raid from Geek Unleashed of 16 more people. So welcome, Raiders. You're just in time as we were just getting started here with Travis Legge.
Hello and welcome. And thank you so much for having me on the show.
I think they got in just after the intro. So just after we introduce who it is, they show up. So now, thank you, Duke and everybody out there for raiding us tonight.
Excellent. So we are kind of going to get into the weeds here a bit about Scarred Lands. For some people in their chat, I know we have some fans of that. Some people are not going to know about it, so we're going to get into some of the introductory stuff on that. But before we get there, I like to always ask questions about how you got into gaming in the first place.
Sure. So I was born in this little podunk town called Mauston, Wisconsin, off of I-90. It's about 45 miles north of Wisconsin Dells.
Okay.
And my older brother got into D&D in like 84.
84. Wow.
Yeah. So he was 7 years older than me. And I was probably 4 or 5 at the time. And we had a neighbor kid that lived like across the tracks. There was a literal set of train tracks that just went right through my backyard. And
know the type.
Yeah. And right across the way, there was this kid, Matt, would always go down to like Lake Geneva, and he'd come back with these like handwritten Dungeons and Dragons things. We didn't know at the time he was going to, like Gen Con and whatnot. But so that got my brother into it because I was a little brother. I wanted to get into it. So I just kind of hung around until they let me, like they drew me up a fighter and were like, here, just take it and shut the fuck up. And yeah, so that's how I started playing. And actually my mother was my first dungeon master. Because this was like,
wow.
Like I said, it was like early 80s. So this was like peak satanic panic and whatnot.
Right.
That's crazy. So my mom's reasoning was, if I'm the dungeon master, then there can't be anything too terrible happening during this game.
There's only so many demons that'll be involved.
Right, exactly. So, yeah, that's how I got started, and pretty much been playing for the most part ever since. I took a small break. A few years ago, I got into filmmaking, and it got to be so time-consuming and just all-consuming. It was all I did. So I took a few years away from the hobby and from the business. But once I got tired of having my heart ripped out and shown to me, like at the end, like Temple of Doom style every 18 months without fail. I was like, oh, maybe I should stop doing this and get back into something I enjoy. So
awesome.
Yeah,
well, cool. It's good to dabble in a little bit of things, figure out what works and what doesn't work for you necessarily, and kind of get to those roots. It's an interesting backstory of how you kind of got into gaming too. It's not a ton of families that bring their kids into it,
Yeah, I think you see it. Well, I don't know. I mean, I think I was just kind of at the right age and had a sibling that was the right age, right? I think there are a lot of people that are my age. I was born in 79. So I think there's a lot of people that are my age that probably...
We're in that same era, yeah.
If you had an older sibling that was into it, you just kind of fell in.
Sure.
And so that also caused me, even though I was kind of in this like weird, isolated, tiny little town in the middle of nowhere, it caused me to have a slightly different perspective on gaming than maybe you might see it in a larger community, in the sense that like certain, some of the like uglier misconceptions or uglier, gatekeeping kind of habits or whatever just were never there. It never would have occurred to me. There's still to this day people who like make noise about women and being in gaming. That never would have occurred to me because my mom was my first DM. Why would like?
Right, yeah.
So the first time I encountered that in reality, I was like, like, what are you talking about?
A lot of this stuff kind of surprises you when you kind of bump into it. Like, it's again, we had another girl that played with us in high school for a little while too, and it was just pretty normal to us. But
we tried to get other girls to want to play too from time to time, but most of them just didn't want any part of it. But we weren't keeping them out; they just didn't want to necessarily spend their Friday.
No, surprise, surprise, we weren't a hit with the girls.
Yeah, but it was just
might have been late bloomer,
Yeah. So those kinds of things were just really mind blowing to me when I first encountered them. But because I guess that's because of growing up in that family environment.
Absolutely,
where we were playing.
Now, did you always play, or did you get into DMing pretty early, or any of that stuff? I
didn't start DMing until it became a necessity.
That's usually how it goes.
Yeah, but that was pretty early on though, because like by the time my brother was 17 or 18, he had discovered girls and cars and hunting and guns because it was Wisconsin. Because what else are you going to do?
Naturally, yeah.
So it was up to me and my friends to sort of figure out like how to carry that particular torch. So I would start running games, and I couldn't get anybody interested in Dungeons and Dragons, but my father lived in Rockford, Illinois, which is where I ultimately wound up moving a couple of years later after my parents had gotten divorced. And there's a comic book shop a couple blocks away from my dad's place. And I picked up the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and Other Strangeness role-playing game, which my friends were more than willing to dive into. They were like, D&D, that's nerdy. Let's be Ninja Turtles. Like, right
Suddenly it all changes.
Right.
They're calling dibs on Leonardo because everyone knows he was the only one with skills.
Right, exactly. and so, yeah, we started playing that. And I had a funny, like, talk about weird full circle stories. My mom started dating this guy that she met about 6 months before I moved in with my dad. And he was exceptionally Catholic.
Oh, okay.
And
another raid coming in. Sorry to interrupt you, Lindy.
Hey, welcome, Raiders. That's another 12.
Raiders.
Wow, it's gonna be a good night tonight.
Yeah. It has been, yes. Love you too, Lindy.
But yeah, so like he came in and caught us playing Ninja Turtles in the basement and was like, "This is the devil's tool."
If anything would be, it's Cowabunga.
Right. And I was like, I'm moving in with my dad. And that was really kind of like one of the last straws. I was already kind of on my way out the door when that happened.
Gotcha.
Yeah, it was funny.
So you didn't start out with a satanic panic, but you managed to find your way into it before it was over. Like,
yeah, I eventually ran into
went the other direction.
Yeah, as I was going into more, well, I mean, this was, the Ninja Turtles, obviously, the role playing game was based on the Eastman Laird comics from back in the day, which were far less family friendly.
Yeah, a little darker for sure
than the cartoon. People were getting disemboweled, and the foot soldiers were not robots; they were just people getting stabbed and shit.
Let's see. It looks like Fruitzilla wants to call you out to say hello. Something in
just
chat.
said something in chat.
Perfect.
I moved to Rockford. When I came to Rockford, I encountered Vampire the Masquerade for the first time.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
We've got a long history of that.
Yeah,
We do love us some vampire around here, so.
It was a life-altering thing. But I also, though, like, while I was doing that, I've also always been a big comic book nerd. And so at the same time, I started playing the DC Heroes that Mayfair did.
Mm-hmm.
I ran like a long-term campaign of that for several years. It was a lot of fun. And that probably spent way more time than I should have. Flunked out of school.
Who hasn't been there before? Yeah.
But then eventually made my way back to D&D and from there to designing. It kind of again, I think probably a lot of the people that are in my age group that got into game design, I fell into it during the beginnings of the OGL.
Right.
So I was like, oh, here's an opportunity. I can make a few bucks and pay for my gaming habit. And it turned into something bigger than that, fortunately.
Now, what was your first contribution to the field?
So I did a role-playing game called Contagion with a buddy of mine. Darius McCaskey was my business partner at the time. And It was real funny because when we first started out, I think our company was something like the 86th or 87th publisher that signed up at like RPG Now. We were like super early in on it.
Wow.
And Darius was like, PDFs are going to be the way that gaming's going to go, man. And I was like, you're out of your fucking mind, but we can make them cheap. So let's just do it. Why not?
Yep.
Turns out he was right and I was wrong. So things went very well for us in that regard. And then we were doing kind of a modern horror, urban fantasy kind of setting.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a lot of fun. And funny thing about that is a lot of the creatures that we used, like stat-wise, we were doing a lot of reskins from Creature Collection because that was also open game content. Mm-hmm. And we loved the creatures that were in that so much, which was the first book of Scarred Lands.
Nice.
We loved the creatures that were in that so much, we just reskinned them to make them modern horror. But like the engine, like the meat of those creatures were very much stuff from Scarred Lands. So again, it's another weird full circle thing.
Oh, that's great.
Where now I'm,
Yeah, and for those who joined us late, our guest tonight, Travis, he is line director over at the Onyx Path, working on Scarred Lands. So I don't know how many people in the chat have played Scarred Lands or fans of it, know about it, or how many people need to become fans of it. But go ahead and sound off in the chat. We'll kind of fill in the blanks here.
This is just so they understand. Scarred Lands is it a supplement for D&D 5e or is it its own setting, really, right?
Scarred Lands is a complete setting. Yeah, it originally was released under the OGL, and now there's a 5e version of it out. The elevator pitch that I like to give for Scarred Lands is if you take Greek mythology and you wrap it up in an issue of Heavy Metal magazine, slam it into a PHP, you have Scarred Lands. It's very, it's kind of this just metal post-apocalyptic fantasy. There was a war between the gods and the Titans on the ground 150 years ago. So the world is still very messed up from that war.
In a lot of ways, it's in a new infancy.
Right. And
it's a whole new world, basically.
Exactly. Old civilizations have fallen. And depending, like if you're playing a character of a particularly long-lived race, like an elf or a dwarf, you might have fought in the Titans' War. Like you might have fought shoulder to shoulder with a god when you were young.
And where you turn this thing kind of on its head is how they come out the victors in this whole ordeal is kind of not the opposite of the actual Greek mythology, but kind of the way it all comes about is a little different.
It's a little different, yeah. I mean, and like, so the Titans can't be destroyed. They can only sort of be contained and debilitated. So they're kind of laying around the world, many of them. There's an entire ocean in the Scarred Lands called the Blood Sea, which is because it's literally made of blood. One of the Titans, Kadum, the Mountain Shaker, had his heart ripped out, was bound with chains, and thrown to the bottom of the ocean. So he's still laying down there, writhing around in his chains, bleeding out of this sucking chest wound, and bleeding so much that it's now turned the entire ocean.
Man.
Yeah, there's a mountain range that are the teeth of the Titan of Gluttony, because the gods basically pulled his teeth out one by one and kind of threw them over their shoulder while they're doing this, and they landed and made a mountain range. So yeah, the land itself is tainted by this titanic presence.
Very cool.
The gods are sort of, now that the war is done, they're sort of trying to put the universe back together. So the people are just left to kind of live in this world and see, what they can make of it and try to survive. And there were a bunch of things that were created during this Titans War that were just sort of abandoned, like Titan spawn monsters, basically, that the Titans created to act as their personal armies. That when the Titans were defeated, the Titan spawn were just left wandering around.
And they don't know anything else other than to fight.
Right.
So they're just out doing what they've always done.
Right. They're just horrible, brutal. If you were made only to rip things' faces off, that was the purpose you were created for. Absent any other orders, you're just going to go around ripping things' faces off.
Man, that's a pretty wild setting to be part of.
Which really doesn't give you a whole lot of second thought about ripping the faces off of some things either, right? Because that's what they're there to do, and you don't have to. There's not a lot of morality questions there when it comes to some of these things.
Right, and it's one of the things that I kind of dig about the setting, because there are definite areas when you have moral ambiguity has crept into D&D a lot in 5th edition, just in the way the stories are being told. And I love that. I absolutely adore that shit. Scarred Lands does a pretty good job of maintaining that, a very good job of maintaining it, in fact, because some of the gods are straight up evil, but they're divine, right? So during this recent war, they had a truce. So the lawful evil god and the lawful good god were fighting on the same side of the war. They had to put aside the differences because, the Titans were a bigger threat. So now there are priests of these evil gods, that there are entire nations that worship these gods, and you have to kind of figure out how to navigate and negotiate with those people. So you still have that moral ambiguity, but you also have these monsters that are just straight up, there's no question. There's no, you don't have to stop. You don't have to pause and think. When you see a Blood Reaper coming at you, a 9-foot tall praying mantis looking thing with 4 arms, and each of the arms has a 6-foot long blade on the end of it, you don't need to stop and go.
No questions about what you do.
I think that guy's here to wrap up the presents for us. Let's,
we should parlay with it.
I'd like to attempt diplomacy with it.
Right. So there's a lot of opportunity for very clear cut, just nope, we're going to go in and just slaughter. And so you can play it along that whole spectrum for sure. And
very cool.
It also gives you very clear markers, right? So, because what fascinates me the most, and one of the things that I'm focusing on with the materials we're creating right now as the line developer, is new players coming into the setting, and that means new characters. That means people that are first level. And so I like the idea that a first level character, to a certain degree, can look at something and go, nope. I
mean, it's hard to get players to make that choice,
right?
Especially in a setting they're not familiar with,
right?
Because it could be big and have lots of arms and scissor-like hands and everything, and the players will go, "We can take it. Hold them up here." It's pretty much how players are. You got to get knocked down a few times before you realize to walk away.
Right. The hope is they only do that in Scarred Lands once.
Now, are there any elements of the game that are particularly geared towards being more brutal? Is it a theme in the game since it's kind of post-apocalyptic, or is that just a style?
Well, narratively, it's definitely the style. We actually all of the core races that you have that are playable in the game are built to be slightly more robust than in a standard 5e game. Simply put, if you've lived long enough to become an adventurer in this world, you're probably a little bit hardier than the average Joe. So there's even a note, if you pick up the player's guide, there are a couple of races that are not listed that are within the 5e core races. They just either don't exist on Skarn, or they exist in such rare numbers that they weren't put in the player's guide. And there's a note on there that if you're going to incorporate those races into your Scarred Lands game, you might want to give them an extra trait or two to bring them on par with the other races, because we are trying to sort of show you, like, this is not safe.
So what are the races that made the cut then? Like, what are the ones that are tough enough to live?
So the core races in the player's guide, you've got the dwarves, and there are 2 sub-races of dwarf in the player's guide. The Charduni, who are sort of from the distant land of Termana. It's a distant continent, kind of on the other side of the planet, and they came over to Gelspad, which is the primary setting, basically in a military conquest during the Titans War. They were servants of the god Chardun, who is the god of he's the god of war and slavery. So he's very lawful evil, and it's very regimented, and everything has its place, and just very cruel, cold, I guess. It's not sadistic, but cold cruelty, if that makes sense.
Oh, of course, yeah.
And so the Charduni dwarves are very similar in their culture and mindset. It's very militaristic, very regimented, very disciplined. Then you have the Kelder dwarves, who are from the Kelder Mountains, native to Gelspad, kind of what you would think of traditionally as mountain dwarves. And they largely are what you would expect from mountain dwarves, with the exception that they tend to be a little bit more, like even more sort of insular. They don't let outsiders into their place, partially because they're beset on all sides by people who are trying to kill them.
Right on.
There was a
little xenophobic.
Yeah, they're a little xenophobic, and there was a very bad episode during the Titans War. They were allied very closely with one of the elven subraces called the Drindali. And there was an episode that is known historically as the Bridge of Betrayal, where the Kelder dwarves didn't show up for a fight where they were supposed to go help the Drindali, and it cost the Drindali dearly. So now the Drindali have sworn sort of a blood oath to eradicate the Kelder dwarves.
And we've kind of talked about that at Gamehole Con. I think it's really cool when something is turned on its ear. Like traditionally, you have the whole elf dwarf dynamic at play, and you think of who's going to keep a deal. It's the dwarf every time. Right. And then in this world, it's spun a little bit. Yep. So it's like keeping your word still like a dwarven trait, that this is like just an epic betrayal as a result, or is that?
Yeah, it was very out of character and very not, like, nobody saw it coming, which was part of the.
Well, I mean, the elves showed up expecting them to be there, so clearly they didn't think they were. It wasn't. They didn't. They weren't like shady people prior to, or nobody would have shown up there to fight with them to begin with.
Right, and again, you're talking about during the Titans War, so you're talking about a direct what the Drindali don't care, is that it was literally a direct order from their god. We're not going there. We will lose.
Yeah, I guess you have to kind of always keep that into perspective.
Right. But the Drindali don't care. Their god nearly got killed in that fight as well. So like it was, you have that level of like grudge kind of going on there. So you have those 2 elven subraces, or dwarf subraces. You have, for elves, you have the Drindali, which are kind of our underground elves. That's about what they share in common with the Drow, honestly, is that they're underground and somewhat at least perceived to be evil.
Okay.
They're more also kind of insular because they have a god who's kind of only surviving because they were magically stuck inside of a golem's body. So like their essence was caught as they were dying and shoved into this body. So like they're moving their entire capital city around under these mountains, trying to stay hidden, trying to heal their god. And that's made them sort of, again, also sort of insular, xenophobic, and clannish. But when the adventurers go out, they tend to be more, a little bit more, throw themselves into adventure, a little bit more gung-ho as a result. And it tends to be a one-way trip. If you leave Deir Drindal to go be an adventurer, you tend to stay.
Well, odds are good you can't find it when you get back.
Right. Exactly.
Or it's moved.
Right. And if you come back,
there's no breadcrumb trails lead you to the new elven capital, right? Like it's just
exactly. And if you come back with other people, they're just not going to. So there's that dynamic, and then there's the Ganges elves who are from the Ganges forest, which are basically kind of what you would imagine wood elves would be. They're a little bit. Our wood elves are a little bit more militaristic, I guess, than you would imagine a standard D&D would be. But that's just because they've watched. Gelspad was once covered with verdant forest, and now there is like an eighth of it that has forest that's not corrupted in some way. So they're kind of like, there's a bit of eco-terrorist kind of baked into their DNA. You know what I mean?
Nice.
We'll protect these trees no matter who we have to gut to do it.
Well, it's kind of it's fascinating because if you have people with not just living memory of the gods and titans in some cases, but you actually seem to have concurrent activity with the gods culturally. Yeah. It's not just a thing you pray to, it's a thing you might see. Now, is that like a common thing or like relatively common, I guess, but
less so since the Titans War. So, to get sort of to get into some top level like meta plot, too very far in the books right now, because that's not where we're really focusing our attention, but just to give you a little bit of the flavor idea. The Titans were forces of nature, right? They're what kept the world working.
Okay.
So when the gods beat the shit out of them and tied them up and bound them and stuck them in pocket dimensions and tore them to bits and all these things, the world stopped working for a minute. And the gods had to be like, oh shit, we have to figure out how to put the stars back and make the world spin again. And so now the gods, who were not necessarily built for the purpose of divine maintenance, find themselves in charge of it.
Gotcha.
So as they grow into those roles, they become less involved with what's going on the ground because they have more celestial concerns at their, that are dividing their attention now.
And from what I literally saw when I looked at some of your videos, they took 150-year timeout.
Yeah.
Right? They just called timeout. All the gods were like, let's just put Earth on hold for a moment. We're all going to figure this out together. We're all going to hold hands, sing some kumbaya. And then if 150 years is over, we go back to killing each other again, right? So, I mean, if you're starting out at 150 years, like right there, you could have this real tense period where, like, as you said, these evil empires and good empires who literally by their god's decree have to kind of leave each other alone. Right. And they're watch each other build up forces and wait for that 150-year mark to drop. It's like the peace treaty of Versailles suddenly just being nullified, right? Everyone goes back to fighting again.
Right. And now that there's no to say that there's no god's influence directly on Skarn would be untrue. They do show up from time to time. And there are aside from the principal, like the main gods, there's a host of demigods who are more active, but they were also not as directly responsible for the cosmic, maintenance, as it were.
Gotcha.
So there still is a divine presence happening, but the divine guidance, somebody literally saying, do this, don't do that, is not what it once was.
Gotcha.
So everybody's kind of operating on old intel.
Sure.
Like real world religion.
Okay.
In that sense.
Absolutely. So like obviously in the history of the game and the setting itself, there's a heavy dependence upon the kind of the deities and kind of like the pantheons and everything. Is that something that comes into day-to-day activity with adventuring and just townsfolks and stuff? Is that something that's very central to the game, or is that just a setting piece?
To an extent, it certainly can be. The way that it generally, side of clerics and a few settlements, there are some settlements that are directly dedicated to the worship of one deity.
Okay.
For example, the city of Mithril is it's run by worshippers of Corian. There are temples to other gods there, but Corian, who's the lawful good, I'm the good guy, I'm the paladin type, is their patron deity. And but aside from places like that, most places are what you would basically call pantheistic. So if you're going to go hunting, you would pray to Tennille, the hunters.
Okay.
If you're going to get ready to get into a fight, you might pray to a Chardoon for prowess in battle and wisdom, or you might pray to Vangal who's the Ravager, if you just want to rip your enemy's throat out and move on with your day. And so you find people that pray to different gods for different purposes. And then you have some people who lean their faith more intensely into one god's realm. And there are plenty of people who also just don't necessarily truck with the gods too much. They don't, nobody really denies their existence. But
it can be kind of hard to do. Yeah,
fighters and rogues. That's where the fighters and rogues finally come back in, right?
Right, but they don't necessarily adhere to it. Though the fighters and rogues also do have kind of gods that they follow.
Yeah. That's one of the things I've always been curious about the way people approach any of the standard D&D worlds is that you get this pantheon, and most players approach it as a toggle switch. I'm playing a character with divine powers. Gods are a thing. I'm playing a character who doesn't have divine powers. Let's not talk about them. But I always kind of felt like it should be more like ancient Greece, where the gods were always there. Multiple temples, multiple gods usually in most civilizations, and you prayed to whatever was needed at the moment.
Right.
Drought, you prayed to whatever god would bring rain. If there was a famine, you prayed to whatever god could heal. So it was, to me, that was always how D&D should kind of be approached. And it's so rare to see somebody kind of take it to that point, in the way that you're doing with this setting.
Well, I think that has a lot to... Oh, sorry.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think it has a lot to do with what's rewarded mechanically.
Sure.
Obviously, as a character, as a narrative element, you should just play your character. But I think players are steered generally towards things that are mechanically backed. Whether it's a class, defined features, there's some class you're playing in the Sweethander game that really don't have a mechanical analog in 5th Ed Dungeons and Dragons. So there's some things in there that play differently. But I think in this case, you see characters that are divine. They have, abilities, spells, and stuff that come straight from their deities. Now, is there anything game mechanic wise that a non-divine caster character is gaining by interaction with religious activity?
There's not a specific bonus that's laid out in the player's guide for. I went to a temple of Tennille and made a sacrifice before I went. That's not there. So that might be a cool thing to see happen. I'll earmark that for later.
Gods and sacrifices to them, book volume 3.
Right, because that is a neat aspect, and it is something that could be applied. Where we really try to drive that mechanic home is in peppering that flavor into every race, every class. The backgrounds in Scarredlands are handled a little differently. So instead of just having a background you choose, you have a regional background, and then you have social background you choose.
Okay.
One of those brings kind of half of the party to it.
Nice.
So the features with those, the religion can come into play with those, with multiple backgrounds that are offered that way. Any class that's touched at all by the gods, any of their features, will have a very unique and distinct flavor to the god that it's drawn from. Because we want to drive those things home. And with the mechanics in 5th edition being as they are, where everybody sort of has a path to magic.
Mm-hmm.
That makes that a little easier to follow through.
Yeah.
And there are other little things too, just like certain races. I know we got a little off sidetracked when we were talking.
Tangents are what we're doing.
There's so many of them.
We'll get back to it because I have something I want to have. I want to have something you want to talk about here in a moment. Go ahead and carry on.
Well, like for example, the Manticora is a race that are basically cat folk, and they're a divine race. There's two types of playable races in Scarred Lands. There's the divine races, which are the ones that fought on the side of the gods during the Titans. And then there's the redeemed races, which are ones that fought on the side of the Titans, but then surrendered. Okay. So the Manticora are a divine race, but they're a divine race that everybody else is scared shitless of because they were the pet race of Vangal the Ravager, who's the chaotic evil god of destruction. So he would just send Manticora hunting parties into cities to just, there might be a Titan spawn in that city, kill everything that breathes within 100 miles of it. And the Manticora would go do it. So that sort of plays into the way they're built as a race because they have that reputation. And they're trying to overcome that reputation. So like mechanically that gives them skills, that gives them, that feeds into why they have the attacks that they have. Gotcha. But they're also working now to create a new culture to sort of subvert that, because once the Divine War was over, give them any orders. In fact, he just left because there was nothing left to kill. So they were like, well, now what do we do?
So it was, I guess, from some of what I was looking at it, is arcane magic then not from the Titans?
Yes and no. So arcane magic was created by the Titan Mesa, who was the first Titan to die during the Titans, or to not die, but to be dismembered during the Titan. And he basically, the reason they were able to get him was he was distracted because he was constantly weaving together the universe while he was doing everything else. So he was basically distracted, and all the gods jumped him and they took him down. And they shredded him and tore him to pieces and basically dissipated him throughout the cosmos. And so he is still floating around in the mystical essence of all magic, of all arcane magic. So when you cast a spell, there's an effect that they call Mesos' Bane. So your spell casting will often be accompanied by things like heat or sound or lightning as you're casting these arcane spells, which is one of the reasons why arcane casters tend to not wear heavy armor in Scarred Lands, because you might cook yourself as your body is heating up from and the theories that they throw around is that is a side effect of Mesos trying to pull himself back together through other people's spellcasting.
So you kind of got like a paradox effect almost with your castings from time to time.
Yeah, and also
5th edition, it's framed as like an optional rule. So if you don't want to track it, you can choose not to use it. But I like to use it in my games because it's very evocative of the setting. It's another thing to make your magic user think. Even if you're not like dealing damage to them, you're making them think. Do I want the discomfort? Do I want the attention? Do I want, to blow my cover? If I cast a spell, everybody within 50 feet of me is going to know that kind of thing.
Well, and I think there's something else that's fascinating to that. By the way, thanks for the bits there, King Fishy. I think these kind of concepts where you have like a kind of a touchy, weird kind of source to the magic. In this case, you're connecting and tethering into the bad guy, essentially. Though I'm not sure if there are technically bad guys in this universe. But anyway, you're tying into this primordial essence of something that shouldn't be. And you're pulling a little bit of that saying, I'm going to use that. I use it for my purposes. They're good, but don't worry. I got it under control, so it kind of have that little bit of a warlock vibe to it.
A little bit, yeah. And the Titans are at their core primordial forces. and they are anthropomorphizations of primordial forces, and some of them are negligent. Like the best of them were negligent for the most part, with one exception, which was Denev, who was the Earth Mother who sided with the gods during the Titans War, and basically is kind of an analog to Gaia.
Yeah, they say very Greek, yeah.
Right.
And that's who your druids. That's who druids in this world follow, right?
The druids that aren't like executed when they're caught. Yeah.
Yeah.
there are still druids that worship all the other titans. There was a war, like 40 years prior to the start, called the Druid War, where druids of all the other titans got together and were like, "We're going to take down these human settlements," and then got the shit kicked out of them.
Yeah, he was like, "Mm-mm."
Like, no.
Well, that's an interesting take because that really makes that druid language special at that point.
Very much so, yeah. And again, there's some like, this is another place where like the faith stuff really comes into play in the character choices you make. There's a race called the Ironbred, which are one of the redeemed. And the Ironbred were part of this Titan spawn race called the Sutak. And these are like giant, muscular horse folk that were created by Thulkus, the Titan of like lava and like raw fire and destructive force, right? And so they're like heat resistant, and they look kind of like, you know, giant steers, and they're just these big, brutal killing machines. And after the Titans War, the Ironbred were like, "No, we don't want anything like that anymore. We're out." And they went and created their own society. And the Sutak still hunt them, and they butt heads, and there's problems there. But the Ironbred have a philosophy to each their own divine, except if you're a Titan worshiper, in which case we'll just kill you. Like, and there's no like, but wait, I'm a no. Like, you
didn't quite say it, but those are horsemen.
Yeah,
like they're like in the way Minotaur's a bull man, they're a horseman, right?
Right. Yes, they're covered head to toe in fur. They have digitigrade legs with hooves, and then they have, you know, a human upper body, generally very massive.
Okay, so not centaur then.
Right.
No, like a Minotaur, only a horse. Yeah, like that's the best way I could describe it when thinking about it. Is they're shaped the way a Minotaur is shaped, only with a horse head. Okay,
gotcha.
Pretty much. And then, but yeah, so they're like, you can't be a druid. I mean, it could be a really cool character concept to try to pull off, like a Ironbred who's a druid. But you better pray nobody ever finds out about it, because it's just your ass. They'll just kill you. You know, things like that. So those things are sort of built in narratively into the setting, you know.
Right on.
You got around to talking about some of your cooler player races, but one I hadn't heard you brought up yet that I saw a little something on, and I think this is really cool, and I don't know mechanically how it works, but you have walking suits of armor with ghost in them as a player race.
Yeah, see, I saved
and
them.
that's just so cool. Like, but I wanted to make sure we get to this before we go on to some other down tangent into some other part of the world real quick while we're talking about these races. Like,
so now you're getting to my heart. These are my favorite playable race in all of Dungeons and Dragons, let alone in the Scarred Lands. And I know that's a really bold statement to make, but I really love them so much, and we're doing so much cool stuff with them that I can't wait to share with you in the coming months. But so these are called the Hollow Legionnaires, and they are unique among the races of Gelspad because they're only about 50 years old. The oldest Hollow Legionnaire is about. And what had happened was during the Divine War, Corian created this battalion of soldiers called the Hollow Knights. Mm-hmm. Basically took a whole bunch of suits of armor and animated them and gave them the spark of sentience and free will and made them his elite battle force. And they fought so bravely and so well for him during the Titans War that he granted them basically the nicest piece of property that was left on Gelspad after the war, like the one area that wasn't trashed. Mm-hmm. He gave it to the Hollow Knights and said, "This is your new home. You're done fighting. You have a life. Make what you will out of it." And he bounced out. And so the Hollow Knights started putting together like a society, and we're like, okay, well, I guess we have a king, right? And then we're going to need like ministers. And how does this work? We better bring other people in. And so they started like recruiting people from the other races to come live in the Gleaming Valley, and they started building a culture. And eventually, like the adorable little Pinocchios they are, they wanted to be able to experience the next stage of life, which is to create life. Well, they couldn't. They had no way of reproducing, but they unlocked this key to create these spires that they assembled in the Gleaming Valley. And these spires reach out to the souls of those who have fallen heroically, or those who still have a heroic spirit despite their death. And those spirits are funneled into the spires depending on what their personality was. It picks which spire they are funneled into, and then they are bound magically into suits of armor, and they become the Hollow Legionnaires. So they wake up.
It's pretty badass.
Kind of like,
do they retain all their previous life's information to a degree?
To a degree, you have Flash. It's like a cross between Sam Beckett and RoboCop.
Mm-hmm.
So like you have flashes of memory. You can pick you get to pick like basically like one skill, whatever you want to be proficient in from like your previous life's memories. And narratively, you may have things that come up, and the level of import that might carry to you can vary drastically from Legionnaire to Legionnaire. So one person might be like, my driving goal in life is to figure out who I was and resolve that person's business. Whereas another Legionnaire might be like, that person's dead. I'm me, and I have my own shit I want to do.
That's a weird life to live, isn't it? Just like
it's kind of second life, It's
don't obliterate my own sense of self to fulfill some version of me that might have been. Well, I mean, it was, but
right. And I love them. I think they're amazing. So you bind yourself into this armor, and everything that's exposed skin is just this like translucent, glowy blue. Mm-hmm. And you weigh basically whatever your armor weighs.
Nice.
And you can, as you go through the character, you can actually bind yourself in a different armor. You can bind into magic armor, tune it.
There it is. I was going to ask you that. I know we talked about it at the game.
And I don't know what they do, but I feel like they should get some sort of advantage on death saves. Like, I don't know why. I just feel like it should really be like a thing for them. But
so in the player's guide as it stands right now, they have a couple of features that they get advantage on death saves. They don't have to take. They take rests, but they don't ever lose consciousness. So you can continue, as long as you're just doing light activity, you can benefit from a full rest. So you can still like make tool checks and read and study and, do a lot of your downtime activities and still benefit from a full rest.
Nice.
I feel fairly confident that it's okay to say this now because I think it's supposed to go live on the blog in about 8 hours.
I'm pretty positive it's okay.
We are rolling out
scoops around here, so feel free to go right ahead.
We're rolling out in the upcoming supplements that are coming out next year. Yugman's Guide to Gelsped and Vigil Watch. We're rolling out a lot of new races, new spells, all sorts of new features. Among those is a revised Hollow Legionnaire. And the playtest for that should be going up live on the Onyx Path blog this week.
Very cool.
We will be soliciting playtest feedback for that. You'll be able to go on the blog, download the class or download the race in its updated form. Check it out at your table, and there's a little survey in there that you can fill out.
Oh, that's sweet. Now, do you have a particular angle you would push people if they're wanting to check it out and understand the setting and everything? They're set. I mean, obviously the player's main book is probably the first place to start, but any particular elements that you'd really steer somebody towards?
So the player's guide, obviously, of course. Two of the easiest things to pick up and kind of hit the ground running with is the Gauntlet of Spirigos is a free adventure that's up on Drive-Thru right now.
Nice.
And that gets you, I think, levels 1 to 3, and it introduces some pretty unique setting elements, and it ties. It does a very good job of showing how Scarred Lands is parallel to a lot of other D&D worlds, but definitely a different spot, right? So you run into some things that are one of the enemies you run into are what's called the Spider Eye Goblin.
Okay.
Which are kind of the standard goblin of Scarred Lands. But these are like 6-armed spider climbing goblins that are mutated and have several eyes. They've been mutated exposure to titanic blood.
Well, that's not incredibly creepy at all.
Yeah, so you get to go into one of their lairs and have a little adventure. It's fun stuff. But it does a very good job of kind of walking you through what that little corner of Galspat is like. It's set in the Fangs Fall Peninsula, which is so named because it's near the Fangs Fall Mountains, which are the teeth of the Titan Gurak.
Nice.
So,
very cool.
Yeah,
so
I would recommend checking that out. And then there's also the Blood C5 ebook if you're into a more seafaring camp.
That seems to be really popular lately.
Yeah, it's going around.
A lot of seafaring stuff out there these days.
Check that out. It's got some extras. It's got some special classes in it that are geared towards drawing power from the Blood Sea, which is a risky and terrible thing to do, but also
sometimes you just got to.
Sometimes you got to take the risk.
Now, okay, in terms of stories, it seems like certain games are better at telling certain types of stories. You know, whether you have a game that's kind of framed around horror genre and that kind of stuff. Are there any particular story types that Scarred Lands is particularly good at?
To my mind, I think Scarred Lands is best when it really takes ownership of its status as a Grimbright setting.
Okay.
It's as dark and terrible and horrifying as 40K. Like everything's dark and screwed up.
Oh, that's a pretty dark spot.
That's going deep right there.
But there is hope, and that hope is you. And when you're running a game that is the theme of, I think that's when Scarred Lands is at its when you, the people, are the players at that table, are the ones who are able to take that mantle of hope and be that light in that dark setting.
So the exception to the rule types. Yeah.
Kind of, yeah. And understanding that despite the fact, one of the places that I'm trying to, I never know quite how to phrase this because I love everything that's out for Scarred Lands, and I literally previous edition and owned most of it before I took this job. I'm a fan of the setting in a big bad way. There used to be in the earlier editions there were on adventures, and even to a degree in the Spirigos adventure I just talked to you about. There's a bit of a focus on let's do this thing to stop this Titanic servant, or let's do this thing to stop this Titan from rising again. And while those stories are cool, and I begrudge no one from playing those, and those are definitely a classic Scarred Lands adventure, it's not what interests me the most about the setting.
Okay.
What interests me the most about the setting is the folks that are trying to get by, and what the adventurers kind of being between them and the folks that are trying to either manipulate them, use them as resources, crush them to nothingness, be it Titan spawn, be it evil governments, be it, overbearing paladins.
Yeah.
One of the things that the gods, another place where the gods come into play very well in Scarred Lands, because I think of the Greek mythology in the DNA of the setting, is it does a very good job of examining those excesses. When you look at any of the alignments in excess, it's bad.
Yeah,
getting too fanatical in any direction is not particularly play well for anyone.
Right, and so when you have societies that crop up based on those beliefs and those teachings that are also to that level of excess, you have problems.
it would seem to me from what I've done some investigating in it because I was curious. It seems to me like it would play very well for almost like a hex clear. Like sort of this idea that like this whole world has been turned upside down and all the parts shaken out and thrown back onto the board, and whatever, like you said, there's a whole mountain range that was not there before and now it is because it's literally this god's teeth or this titan's teeth. Like, well, what the hell is in there? Like there's a lot of most campaign settings when you come into it, the world is pretty known, solidified, what's all there, and you have a map and everything's labeled on it, of course. But I mean, like you get into these settings, it's like, here's where all the good stuff is. And then something creeps up in one little corner of it. And you have to send heroes out to stop whatever's in that one tiny little corner that's slowly growing. But here it's like, who knows where the heck all this stuff is? Like it could be literally anywhere. Like,
right. And there's still, like meteorological events that are occurring that are like aftershocks of this war. They're, like 2 decades ago was a blood monsoon that flooded the eastern half of the continent with bloody rains from the Blood Sea. Like shit like that's still happening. Like
right. And if a meteor falls, it's like, what is it? Just a meteor, or is that a sign from a god? Is that a titan?
Right.
Like you have to go figure out what the hell's now out there. Like even things you just take for granted in a normal D&D world, this world is just completely nuts. Like
right, you have no idea. Yeah, and you could very much. I think like a cool idea for a campaign would be like you start off in this village, that's kind of in a fairly decent part of the world. It's not horrendously overrun by Titan spawn, but it's not the safest place in the world either. But you clear out that little area and you fortify that little area and you make that little area just safe as houses. And then you go out to the next ring, and you could really build a whole big campaign trying to just make try to make a safe little area. Yeah.
That's what you do. You're just hex clearing at that point. I mean, but it does it like when you look at the way the map is laid out and when you look at it, like it looks like it could be a really cool way to play that. And there's not a lot of settings I get into there that I see where I'm like, oh yeah, hex clear. That's what we're supposed to do here. But this one does seem like it could be done that way and it'd be pretty cool.
Well, that's awesome to hear. Yeah. I agree. I think that would be a perfectly fun campaign. And if you were very smart about it, ongoing campaign. If you were careless about it, it would be a very short and bloody campaign.
For sure.
Well, as we kind of hinted at earlier, right? Everybody's first campaign is a short, bloody one because no one knows to run away, and then everyone learns to run away, and then you can have a good long campaign.
It's true. And one of the things that just to tangent for a second, as we do, one of the things I love about the creatures in Scarred Lands is that there are some things that are like, super low CR. But they're just terrifying in their presentation. And I think that resonates well with players if the GM invests half a second in reading the description. Right. There's these rats, or vermin derivatives, I guess, that basically just wash over a creature like a cow in a swarm and just eat its flesh.
Ugh.
So like you'll just be walking down a road, you'll look over and you'll see some livestock and you see one of it just start to disintegrate and you're like, oh shit, those are those things. And they're like little CR 1/2 creatures or whatever, but there's 20 of them and they're hungry.
It really seems like a world where a DM who wanted to could really just throw anything into it almost. Like if you wanted to get around to where if you wanted it to rain frogs one day, it could just rain frogs and you just could, and it just means something and it just happens from that point on and nobody would question the reality of it. Like, is it that kind of a chaotic world?
You can certainly that is, and there are some gods that lend themselves particularly well to that. So if those gods if their themes are being explored in the game, there's one god, named Enkili, who's kind of the trickster god, and they're a chaotic, non-binary, very kind of some Loki sort of feel to them, but they're also, they also have like a storm god quality as well. They are a bit temperamental, and are known to just fuck with people for no discernible reason. So you really, there's frogs raining on your stoop.
You know, he had a long full day of meetings with all the other gods too, and then when he got out, it was like it's time to just screw with some people. You know, I mean,
got cut loose every once in a while.
Got bored and decided you looked like fun. And that could be the whole basis of a campaign. So I mean, there's a lot of ways you could spin that, and cool. There's a lot of, depending on how deep you want to go with it or how much you want to make up. You know, it creates a really good framework, even if you don't want to do like deep lore research into the previous edition and whatnot, which I wouldn't want to do necessarily either. You know, if I didn't already know it all, I wouldn't I'm going to go read 40 books before I start the campaign. Don't do that. Grab the book and get started.
That's good.
There's a lot of plugins where you can grab a hook and go, oh, I can hang 10 ideas on this hook. And they can be yours and they can be unique. And
that reminds me a lot of Exalted. You know, there's so much source material. You know, it could feel a little overwhelming at times, but if you just hit that one corner, like you said, you could dive in, figure out what's good, and then as you need, you plug in new elements. It's nice.
Absolutely. And we're trying to, as we're rolling things out for edition, we're really trying to sort of streamline that stuff, make sure we're giving you the top level flavor and giving you enough hooks in that flavor so that if you want to just take those and run with them, you have everything you need.
Oh,
if you want to go look at the old stuff and go, oh man, I want to learn everything there is to know about in Keeley, those books will always be at drive-thru. Go grab them, but you don't have to, you know. And our aim is to make sure that you never feel like.
That's good. Yeah. Now, since this was an established IP essentially before you got started with it, what are some particular things that you came into the job and said, I want to do this? You know, like these are the things I want to push, maybe revise. Are there any elements in there in particular that have your fingerprint firmly on them?
The only thing that I can probably really talk about right now
okay, yeah,
is the overall approach of reframing onto the new player and reframing onto that first, what's this world like for some poor sap that decides they're going to be an adventure.
Gotcha.
You know, and looking at the kind of the worm's eye view of the that was kind of when I had the opportunity to pitch a roadmap. That was very central to my idea for the roadmap was we have all this Titanic stuff going on, and that's great, the Titans and gods and all that stuff. But if we make the game about that, we're not going to grab people's imagination, I don't think, in the same way that we will if we make it about you living in that world.
Yeah, because ultimately speaking, when you're sitting around the table, you're playing a game with a group of people playing people. You don't get to play the Titans, probably. You don't get to play the gods, probably. You know, so yeah, I think that is something that's super important. Which edition?
And it's also important because of this huge influx of 5e players and the viewpoint that they're coming in and telling their stories. They're telling a story, you know, about their character. And so you have to, if you don't approach it from that angle, like you really will kind of, I think, miss the boat on a lot of these players coming in. So I think it's vital to approach it that way. Like,
absolutely.
Yeah. We got a question from chat here real quick. Sorry to cut you off, but
we do.
Leviathan wants to know which edition of Dungeons and Dragons best suits Scarred Lands.
I mean, I feel like that's a loaded question, Leviathan. No, I really think 5th edition's rules work well with it, particularly with some of the tweaks that you find with that we're making through the races. But let me preface that by saying I'm kind of a 5th edition fanboy. And I spent a long time developing and working in 3rd edition and 3.5. And I think you can get too far into the weeds in that particular system.
Sure.
Feeling like you're going to accomplish something narratively with a little bit of mathematics. And I think one of the biggest problems, if I'm going to wax all philosophical on game design for a second here, one of the biggest problems
it's Jeff's favorite thing to do, but he doesn't always like the answers he gets when he goes down this path. So
I don't mind.
Brace Jeff for the worst.
Difference of opinion is always welcome.
One of the things, and this is not, let me say, this is not a flaw inherent in the system. This is a flaw inherent in how people engage systems. Mm-hmm. I think 3rd edition and 3.5 too quickly fell into substituting mathematics for meat. Mm-hmm. I don't need to give you a hook. I don't need to give you a narrative beat because I can give you a +1 or a -1 and it's going to have the same impact. And it's not. Yeah. Those do different things. Yes.
I believe it. Yeah, and that's the thing. Like we were touching on it earlier, we're saying that there are certain rules that can inform a narrative. That can maybe not inform it, but can buttress it a little bit. Like there's things like in the World of Darkness, like nature, nurture, kind of things. You got your flaws and stuff. In 5th edition, you got your bonds and your flaws and your ideals and these things that they help kind of push those elements to the fore. And like you're saying, like the +1s and fiddly numbers don't really do anything.
Right.
I think the abilities to say like, here's a new thing you can do.
Right.
Those are cool.
Things that are opening it up narratively and things that are pushing, they're scratching both itches is really what you want to be able to do. Mm-hmm. And the way that I'm trying to approach that from like a macro level in design is to say, like, these are the types of people that inhabit this world, right? Mm-hmm. And in order to achieve X, Y, and Z, you need to be able to dedicate your efforts to it. Mm-hmm. So the subclass mechanic really does work well. Okay. Because and one of the things we get as Yugman's Guide starts to roll out in 2020, and as we start doing some of these open development play tests, Scarred Lands characters are beefy and they're meaty, and if you put a Scarred Lands orc and a Forgotten Realms orc in a room, the Scarred Lands orc's going to walk out. Forgotten Realms orc's probably not going to walk out. It might get carried out if they're very lucky. That's just the way that they're built. So that also lends to subclasses that might have some beefier abilities, some beefier things they're drawing from. But that also gives us, because we've got that, because 5th edition is such a narrative-driven system.
We're having a little bit of a technical go on here. Sounds like you're relying on it here. So give us just a second to let that kind of catch up.
Sure.
You just lost the call entirely.
Discord is crap itself.
I can hear you.
Okay. We're going to do a quick pause here and get like a little 5-minute thing up on the screen here. We'll go ahead and reset the call.
Did it just fix itself?
I think it did.
Okay, well, there we go. Good old Discord.
Good old Discord. Good job, Discord.
So
I'm blaming the snow that passed through overnight. That's
fair.
That's what it is.
Could be.
Yeah. So I guess what I was driving at was that having that system latitude gives us a little bit more room to hang that narrative meat into those. Mm-hmm. So I think that 5th edition lends itself well to it, because what you wind up with in 3.5, going back through, as I'm doing a lot of this design, I'm referring to these earlier books, right? Mm-hmm. And Scarred Lands in 3.5 very heavily on prestige class.
Mm-hmm. Well, naturally,
right.
Yeah, that's the system that had in play, yeah.
Right. So as you're going through these things, and you're looking at like all the fiddly builds you would have to get to, I want to be just to yank something out of my tail, I want to be a Calastian Black Dragon Knight. These are the mounted, you ride a mock dragon into combat. You have to get, I don't know, like 15 levels of play or something like that under your belt before you can get there. And you have to do X, Y, and Z. And then by that time, you're tracking so much shit on your character sheet then now I have to also track this dragon's abilities that I'm writing too.
By that point, 90% of campaigns have ended.
Right, exactly.
You're not even getting to it. You're not even getting there.
Right. So let's make this a subclass, and let's give this, somebody's getting this in between level 1 and level 3. Where does this fit?
I do like that concept of, being able to play the type of character you're looking to play out the gate, like not having to do a bunch of hoop jumping to kind of get to the point where you can play, a guy who carries a banner around. It's interesting. Like in 3 point whatever, 3X's, just because of the structure of it, like you were saying, the prestige class basically being the only way to specialize outside of the core classes.
Right.
You had to have all these prereqs, you had to have all these level gates, you had to have these feats, so
often they required multi-classing before you got to them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, so you're already...
And that's where I say, like, making one choice, and this is always my complaint about 3X, is that making one choice about what you wanted to be basically took a lot of other choices away from you. You had to make these other choices to get to that choice. And to me, that's what I always hated about that system, was I couldn't really every level decide, what has my character learned? This is the feat I want to pick based on what he's learned narratively. It was, I'm sorry, if I don't take X, I can't get to Y down the road where I want to be. So it was, I always felt too shoehorned in by that part. Like, so that's what I love about the way that Fifth Ed does that, and that narrative aspect of it is it gives you all up front and then just lets you play it.
And this is a place where I take some hits, just in like the stuff that I put out for, oh, hey, Kai. Sorry, I just saw somebody in chat.
Yeah, Stonefly. Yeah.
She's one of our longest fans.
So she's amazing, and I adore her. So like,
small world,
isn't it though?
Yeah.
So one of the things that I designed for, and I catch flack on this sometimes, especially for stuff I put out at the DM's Guild. I try to design where like you're going to run through 1 or 2 adventures, and then you're going to pick a subclass. So like if that means that I write a adventure that starts you out at level 1 and you're going to level midway through that motherfucker, and then you're going to level again at the end, and it's one dungeon crawl, so be it, because to my mind, that's where the fun, those first few, like if you wanted there, I've never wanted to slap the dice out of somebody else's hand. You play D&D however the fuck you want to.
Right.
Never let anybody tell you differently. But having said that, there's nothing more boring to me than session 4 of a level 1 game. Jesus Christ, give these people some experience already. Let them level.
So that's an interesting one too, because a lot of people have difference of opinion on where the sweet spot is for them.
Right.
Like I, for instance, I like that kind of mid-range, between like, I don't know, level 8 to level 13, somewhere in that range. Right. Like that's where I'm having the most fun. Like my build's kind of coming online. I can do some things. I got more than one tool.
Right.
I've kind of fleshed my character out a little bit. I'm established, and I can interact with interesting things in the world. And still tell those small stories, but also kind of dabble into some big ones. Do you have a particular window that you prefer?
I kind of, this is going to sound like the parents cop-out answer, but I kind of love every tier.
Yeah.
I do like the low level, like, we have no idea what the hell we're doing. We're all going to die. Shit, panic. Those are fun. But I think those get old the quickest. Mm-hmm. Which is probably why they're the shortest.
Right.
I would say probably my least favorite is tier 2, because it feels so much like your every level feels like you're waiting for the next. Not even like for the next level, for like the level after the next level. Right? Like you're
what are you categorizing as tier 2 for the audience here?
Like speaking like level 1 to 4 for tier 1, 5 to probably 9 for tier 2.
9 to 10.
Yeah, 10 to 15 for tier 3. Tier 3 is probably my absolute favorite. So kind of in the same range where you're talking, because you can still go save a village from a monster that's plaguing it, but you can also, at the very least, convincingly smack talk like a king or a demigod and walk away from that and be dead. I do love me some like top end super epic like level 20 shit though. Like I ran a campaign that went about 2 years where we were they were chasing down pages of the Book of Eldar was the core conceit of it. So they were playing hopping all over the place, and
sure,
you know, I was pulling out like the Magic the Gathering plane shift books and shit, and we were just like doing all sorts of crazy shit. And it ended, and it was funny because for 20 levels I ran these people through campaign and through combats, and it was like the Three Stooges the whole time, just slapsticky as shit. And then the last battle, they're fighting Acererak, Tiamat, Lolth, and I can't remember who the fourth one was, but this was like just like the Legion of Doom, right?
So you had the kiddie paddles on for him, yeah?
Right. So I'm like, I'm gonna break out some minis for this.
Jesus,
like this is the time, right? So we break out minis, and everybody had 2 characters. It was a big con.
Mm-hmm.
But I break out the minis, and all of a sudden I watch these people who were literally like shooting each other in the ass and like fastball specialing the barbarian gnome at people and just like ridiculousness turn into this well-oiled combat machine after like round 2 of combat. And I was like, where has all this been? They're like, well, we can see now. We have minis. I'm like, all right, well, so now I use minis. But
it's amazing what a map will do for you, doesn't it?
Right, yeah. Because that was always theater of the mind, you know, but I was like, and that works for some campaigns.
That's a big division in players too. Like we started off theater of the mind, and then we went to dice and, you know, not dice, miniatures and, you know, pen and paper and everything. And after that, I don't really ever want to go back to theater of the mind. There are certain qualities of theater of mind that I do like. Like there's certainly every round you're having to describe everything. So there's that visceral connection there that sometimes gets lost when you're dealing with miniatures. But I love the tactical element of looking at the table and being like, here's what I need to be doing. Here's where I could go to be effective. Here's something I could do that would be, you know, advantage. You know, and I feel like you miss that sometimes.
I think it facilitates the players feeding on one another's ability to. But again, though, let me clarify that by saying, specifically speaking about D&D and about games where you have like a more tactical combat.
Sure.
I would never want to use a map if I was playing Vampire the Masquerade.
No. You know
what I mean? I would never want to use a map if I was playing.
It's hard for me as someone who LARPed Vampire for years to even just go back to a table with Vampire. Like people say, you want to play tabletop Vampire? I'm like, no, I really
walk
don't.
around the
Not
house
if you've LARPed it for 10 years, like you can't go back to that table at all. Start down, rock always wins. Right. That's all you got to know, right?
There you go. Yeah, so I mean, like, but yes, in a D&D setting, it's once you go to maps and minis, it's very hard to unring that bell of like, holy shit, this is really letting tactics come to the fore.
Yeah, you know, not every table is going to be into tactics necessarily. I know there's plenty out there of people that are completely on the opposite end of the spectrum. But for me, I think that if I'm going to bother with the combat, the tactics are an important part of what makes it fun for me.
Right.
You know,
and what are you aiming for? Obviously, fight. I was aiming for a big, you know, bombastic brawl, or I wouldn't have brought out the biggest guns I could get my hands on.
No kidding, man. How did that go, by the way?
Surprisingly well. Part of it was the I'm a sucker for like players wanting to sacrifice themselves and throw themselves into the abyss to save the day. So like one of the players was like, I will let you take me over. Because it was the end of the universe, and they had like get out of this universe free card. So one of them basically made a deal with Tiamat and was like, you can ride me into the next universe if I can control you for this fight.
Ooh.
She was like, done. Yeah. So that turned the tide of battle. But
God, that's brutal.
I just opened up Rise of Tiamat and handed it to the player, and she was like, what? I'm like, yeah, there's your character sheet for the rest of the fight.
Oh, wow.
She's like,
crazy.
Oh, this changes some stuff.
Yeah, just a little.
Just a wee bit.
Well, we were talking kind of about maps, and we've got chat here getting ready to chime in. One of the things that I always found that happens with a map, when I see a map, two things happens. One, for me, and I don't know if other players feel this way, and Jack can kind of chime in. Once I have a map and there's things on the map, I quit asking questions as a player. Everything that's on the map is on the map. Everything that is. When we used to play Theater of the Mind, one of the things that always got me into D&D originally was it was this interactive experience where you could say you're in a room and I start asking questions. Is there a candle? Is there a torch? Is there this? And the DM immediately then had to start kind of, yes, there's one. It's over there. Can you get to it? Yes. And it was just back and forth. And these kind of things caused me to create more input into what was going on in the room. Now the DM already has it laid out. Is there a table over there? No. Clearly I can see there's no table. I don't need to ask any questions. I'll just wait my turn, take my 2 attacks, and I'll be done. So to me, it's less engaging with a map. And when I see a map, the second thing is I go, next 3-4 hours of my life, right there. We're not doing anything else but that right there. So that's to me what maps mean to me. And sometimes that's cool, and I like tactics. And sometimes I'm like, I don't know if I want to do 3 hours of combat tonight. So it's sometimes it varies. It's just the mood you're in when you come to the table. But that's what a map means to me. So good and bad, both all in the same thing.
That's interesting.
It is interesting. Yeah, I mean, from a game design perspective, I think there are things that you look for, like carrots and sticks, in gamer behavior. And for you, you needed that give and take to kind of paint the picture and to kind of define things that you would or wouldn't try to do. For me, I found that kind of groping for what is in the rules to be one of the things I didn't like about games. Not specifically about this narrative description thing here, but if I'm in a game system where the rules are really fuzzy, I don't like that. I sit down and I go, what can I do? Well, it's anything I can convince my DM to allow me to do. Well, now I have to haggle.
And this is where it's funny you bring that up, because I'm going to really sound like a corporate company shell person.
Yeah,
but I'm not, I swear. Don't get me wrong, I love Onyx Path, but I'm saying this because I genuinely mean it. If you look at the story path system, the way they've come up with handling with momentum and complications, and that the whole system, the whole sort of sub engine. I don't know if either of you have looked at.
I'm not particularly familiar, but
it's the engine that Scion second edition runs on, and the Trinity Continuum that just came out runs on.
Yeah, I know there's been a trend towards things like momentum and what is in Zweihander?
Isn't Fallout using that as well?
I think so.
Clint talking about that, because he was talking about maybe looking at Fallout. So.
Possibly something similar. Yeah.
The Zweihander's got a different system of fortune and misfortune, where the players start with it, then they give it to me, and then I use it and I give it back to them, and it goes kind of back and forth on.
Is this more like a fail forward kind of system? Kind of thing.
Sort of. I mean, so the way it works in Scion and Trinity and in StoryPath is if you fail, or if you choose to fail a roll, you can gain momentum, and that can then apply as bonuses to future rolls.
Man, that's cool. I like that.
You also get narrative complications that you have to sort of buy off with successes. So you can succeed on a roll, but you still have X problem. So you have to get more successes to buy off the complication that X problem is creating. So those are some ways that I think, but there's also in Trinity specifically, there's a subsystem called dramatic editing.
Okay.
Where you have points of inspiration that you can spend to affect the scene. And that can be in ways it'd be real handy if there was a bottle over here I could break over this guy's head. Let me spend an inspiration. Ding. And you have a bottle to break over their head. Or it could be, I would really like to have knocked out one of those guards and brought them with me. Spend 2 inspiration and you can do that. Okay, and now you have a guard. So
I can get into that. Yeah.
So you have the player has a certain amount of editing control over the story, but it is a measurable resource.
Yeah.
Too. So it's not just I just get to pull things out of them. Right.
Yeah.
So something like that with a structure, I can understand. Things I can't wrap my head around is stuff like Fate, where I can't I just, and that's not a problem with Fate. That's a problem with me. I don't
We're on the same wavelength. I go, no.
Right.
I could be creative. I could be, open to whatever, but that I don't know, that whole wishy-washiness of rules drives me bonkers. It would be like trying to do anything without physics being constant. It's just
right.
I can't be creative in that environment because the bounds are too loosey-goosey, right, and nothing seems to have as much meaning to it.
Give me some kind of a framework.
Yeah.
And that's where I think StoryPath does a really good job. And some of those mechanics, I might very well look to co-opting into 5e in the Scarredlands sphere just because they work. And Pugmire, Eddie Webb's game, does a really good job with like the Fortune Bowl concept there of allowing some of that dramatic editing kind of stuff into play. And so I think that would be a nice mechanic to overcome that whole, this is the map and that's all there is.
Right.
You know what else may help with that is, do you find that that's more of a problem if you're looking at not to like put people on blast or call names out specifically, but do you find that it's more of a problem looking at a Mike Schley map than you do looking at a Dyson Logos map?
I wish I knew the difference of what you just said.
Okay,
I'll tell you what I do know the difference in.
Sure, go ahead. By all means.
I'll say this much. Our DM puts an incredible amount of time into his maps. So when I play if you watch our Everstorm games and you see his maps, like they're extremely detailed out. I fought on a table last session and I knew that table was there before the combat started. I saw it. I knew it was there. I didn't have to ask if there's a table to jump on. It was on the map. I think where the difference for me is when we used to do the hand-drawn maps. Now, these Roll20 maps get super detailed really quick. You can find resources very quickly. You dump them in there. Sometimes there's things in a map that a DM doesn't expect when he puts it on there. I had an incident in a game I was running where they found a propane tank. I didn't think about being a propane tank when I put it on there. Just blew my whole building up instead of doing the adventure. Sometimes this shit just happens with Roll20, right? You're playing with other people's assets to a degree. But when we had the hand-drawn maps, there wasn't always that detail. So you still had that kind of having to ask, what's in this room? It's a square. Cool. Oh, now there's a table here. Table gets drawn on there as it goes, right? It felt like this immersive sort of thing that went along. So I guess for me, playing in those worlds, I don't know where you're going at with the question because I don't know what those two different things are. But
like I was talking about kind of the two cartography scene in like the D&D. You've got the super detailed full color maps that have the rooms and all the furnishings and all that stuff in them. And you've got the very simple, here's the outline of the building style maps that are kind of like your old school cartography. And so asking kind of which, if you find a difference.
For sure. So, for me, the fleshed out detailed one, I think is more evocative to me. I find more creativity out of those. I can immediately look at it and go like, this seems like this may be possible in here. Let me get some clarity. Let me follow through. If it's there, cool, let's run with it. Whereas like the open-ended one, I feel like I don't feel as inspired by that. I mean, there's a lot of room to fill in, but I like a little bit more hook there, I guess.
And is that speaking as a player or speaking as a DM?
A little bit of both.
Interesting
like
question.
A little bit of both. As somebody who's currently doing a little bit of both, I'm like, I got a mad amount of respect for people who do this stuff on the regular. 'Cause, some of my maps are horrible, and then especially my ones I'm running my live game. I did a dungeon recently, and I'm not going to go into the gory details of it, but it was gory. And when I got done, I was like, that map was pretty shit, but I got through it all right.
Well, I mean, obviously there's the work that it takes to put together a map that's more detailed, but that's an interesting question. I think that you don't want it over full. You don't want it to the point where players don't have any agency into the circumstances, but I feel like you have to provide at least enough there to get the players' creativity loaded and ready to go. You have to have enough in the room to where they feel like there is some reason to be in one corner versus another. Why is it an advantage for me to do anything in this besides stand where I'm at? I think an empty room, why am I seeing this?
Right. And there's a certain amount of the raw math, right? This is here so you can count squares.
Sure. Yeah.
But I do think you need to go a little bit beyond that. And it's funny as we're talking about this though, there's a spell, and speaking of mechanics that evoke the setting, there's a spell in Scarredlands called Unseen Cartography. where you basically create an unseen servant, but it does a map as you're walking along in a place.
Oh, nice.
So that's kind of like a nice setting conceit. If you want to have the players do their own cartography,
That's cool.
Have somebody cast unseen cartographer, and then you describe the map as their cartographer's drawing it.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
Yeah. You draw the map.
Good.
Offload some of the work on the players.
See, I remember when we were first starting off, I used to make all the maps on the back of a piece of paper and try to like flesh it out. So I think even then I needed that. So like I was always the guy. I was like, what size of the dimensions? Okay, where's the doors? You know, and every time I'd be wrong. You look back at the real map, you'd be like, that's no. Okay.
Yeah. We had somebody doing that during Dungeon of the Mad Mage. One of our players just drawing out as I was describing. All right, so you turn this way and you go this many feet and yada yada yada. Mm-hmm. And their map was sad. It was just sad.
But I think it's really important.
Would be interesting is to do a completely narrative dungeon map, and then when you're done, ask like the 5 players to draw the map and just see how close any of them get to the same map.
Right.
Like,
well, see, and that's one of the problems I have with it is that like when it's not a shared experience in the fact that everyone sees the same thing, we're in a different story together.
Right.
You know, so like I feel like the map itself kind of ties it in immediately. Like all the players and the DM know exactly what's going on. They know exactly where you're at. And there's none of this like at the end of the game session going, well, actually, I thought we were in like 5 different rooms. No, it was just the same room with 5 doors. Like,
well, you can have that on the map.
You know,
some people ain't paying attention because combat rounds take too long.
Not paying attention and not being able to figure it out are 2 different things, though. You know?
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, but it is interesting. You have that problem sometimes with 5 players going, what did we do last game again?
Oh, God. Yeah, for sure about that. Yeah, it's interesting because I think for our group in particular, we've always homebrewed. Like, we've never played a module. Like, I think I played like a couple modules at like a con or something, but that's been the extent of it.
Now, we took settings and homebrewed inside them. We were really good at doing that sort of stuff. Like, that's where I think we really, some of our better games sometimes were the ones where we took a module or a setting, was just like, we're playing at this, but we're throwing everything out. We're doing our own way. Like, that's, we really looked at this.
This is kind of another place where I'll fangirl about 5e a little bit and even talk about how 5e has kind of inspired some of the things I have planned for like what's coming up in Scarredlands, because one thing 5e has done very well for the most part. There's a couple of adventures that aren't quite as good at it as others, but the official WotC 5e stuff has been very good at building sandboxes that have kind of a core narrative in them. That gives you the toolbox you need to do that homebrew without having to like literally invent a whole world.
Yeah, I guess it helps having decades of experience come before you to play off of, you know?
Right.
It's a lot of learning.
And so like one of the things, there's the 2 projects that we've got coming out in 2020. Yugman's Guide to Gelspad is very player facing. It's framed narratively as a list of communications between Yugman, who's kind of this ancient wise wizard, and some various other people across the continent. But he's talking about possible heroes and villains, threats, and potential allies to the people of Gelspad. And that's the narrative framework by which we're presenting these new races, new classes, That's
cool. It's kind of reaching back to the old World of Darkness style a little bit.
Little bit, yeah.
The books are designed, yeah.
A little bit along those lines. And then the other project, Vigil Watch, is more location focused. So it's about this group. The narrative frame is this group called the Vigils of Vesh, which are a group of rangers that are kind of the self-appointed guardians of Gelspad, running around to various areas and basically sending in communiques about like, this is what this village is like, and this is what this culture here is like. So in working on that, I've gotten to expand some of the material that's in the core book in a fashion that gives the GM and the players a deeper insight into certain cultures. So like, for example, the Ironbred we're talking about, they have, I think, a total of about 5 pages of actual text about them in the entire player's guide. So we got to do a chapter of Vigil Watch that focuses heavily on the Iron. But even in creating that, it's much more because of seeing the example, like of how it builds, these sandboxes. Mm-hmm. It's much more about how do I build this skeleton and put enough compelling hooks onto it, as opposed to how do I map out every detail of this village, because I only have X number of words to do it in anyway. Right. And if I were to map out every detail of this village, I am certain that every DM who bought this would just throw out half of what I wrote and replace it with their own shit anyway.
Well, potentially, or we were talking about the mapping situation where it's too much information or too little information. Both ends are problematic for reasons. Like for me, that was a reason why, and we've talked about this before, that the Star Wars universe is difficult for me as a player or a DM. It's like you sit down and you're like, what story can you tell that isn't the movies? Well, there's all these other things you could do, but like when people come to a Star Wars, there's all this defined IP. There's all this, story arc that's happening. Where do you put your story relative to this? It's already fleshed out entirely.
That's because you hadn't considered a Baby Yoda.
Well, I hadn't considered a Baby Yoda. That's true. So, I think the approach of not entirely less is more, but I think not answering every question, not fleshing out every piece of the world and that kind of stuff, I think is important. There needs to be some untold story there for a table to pick up on.
I agree 100%. I think the real, even for a GM, even if you're crafting your own story, I think it's too easy as a GM to overplan even a dungeon.
Yeah, write the players out of the story.
Right. Give yourself some hooks. You know what I mean? There's going to be 5 hooks that are going to be in this region of the dungeon. Mm-hmm. These are the plots that are going to be going on. And there's nothing wrong with like a well-stocked dungeon that is, I kick in the door, I kill a monster, shit, and I leave. That's fine. But if you're not running that, then I think you're better served to have hooks and through lines and narrative bases to touch than to script your stuff out, because you're going to wind up putting in hours upon hours upon hours of scripting for your players then to just go the other direction. As one of the things when I ran that big long epic camp, I drew heavily from the Tales from the Yawning Portal. And I don't know if my players were like reading it when I wasn't looking, if they bought copies and didn't tell me, but they had an uncanny ability to just hone in on where they had to go and ignore the rest of the fucking dungeon.
Oh, interesting.
Like, almost every time.
Yeah, it could be one of two things there. I mean, like you said, they could have read it already and that ruins the surprise, but it could also just be a hallmark of a well-designed story that the clues were there,
Right. And unlike a lot of D&D tables, they had zero interest in what's in these other rooms. They were like, here's the MacGuffin. What's in the other rooms? Probably shit that wants to kill us. Let's go. That was we got first. Let's get the fuck out.
Definitely depends on the types of characters you have. And again, like I think if you're in a clear dungeon, kick in doors, eat some pretzels, drink some beer kind of campaigns, you're going to go to every freaking room. Right. If you're in the like, this is a narrative, we were here for a job, we're going to do this thing, our characters don't want to look at death as a possibility, we want to get in and out. Yeah, you're just going to find your true path and go.
Right. And I like almost felt bad for the designers going through these. Like, oh, you went to. I feel like I should like send you a card or something.
It's got to be rough when you see your stuff streamed, right? Like that's got to be the hard part, right? When you watch, like they got what from that? Like, all right, this DM's doing a good job of rolling with those punches here, but I mean that is not where that was going at all. Like, I mean, I should have rewrote that different. Like, I'm sure there's got to be a lot of like rethinking after you see some streams try it, and you're like, okay, that is.
So you haven't quite got away from the director's side of things, right? What we're saying here.
It's a little surreal. Like I worked on the Haunt series with Phil Beckwith for Dungeon Masters Guild, and every year the Praetor's Rejects guys do a stream of the new module and the previous one. So this year they did all 3 of them. We just put out the 3rd installment. And so it's really surreal and weird watching them. Because I also know as a streamer, like there are choices you make just for time, right? You know what I mean? So
that's true.
I'm like, oh, you didn't go to this thing, and you should have gone to the thing because it's gory, awesome. But like, I also know like it also would have added 45 minutes to your game, and you have people have lives.
Or another session, depending on how many sessions, like, well, the game just got one session longer, like it's
right. But so it's weird. You watch your babies, die on the vine, like these. These scenes, you're like, I really like it when the stairway goes flat and the blood starts pouring down it. Why didn't you use that? Well, because it would have added 20 minutes to the game.
Session ends at midnight.
Yeah.
How it goes.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Those artificial constraints really can bog it down quite a bit. But you said you had a pretty early morning tomorrow with all kinds of jam-packed goodness coming.
I do.
And we are at the close to the wrap-up time we normally pick. So this sounds like a good time to do our outro and kind of get us head in that direction at least. Otherwise, we'll probably be chatting for a while.
A bit. I hope everybody's enjoyed the meandering.
Oh, it's been good. It's been great. And I appreciate you coming tonight.
It's been a blast.
We're all going to visit that map topic later now, aren't we, Jeff?
Oh, 100%. We're going to be all over
we just scratched the surface of it today. That's going on a list in case, we get some guestless weeks where it's a good topic and we throw down like this is going to happen.
So obviously we touched on a lot of things that people can get into with Scarred Lands. You said you're doing some streaming. Obviously, we'd like to push some of that out there as well. So where can people find you and your lovely contributions to the world?
Well, so on Twitch, my channel is Plastic Age Plays, and I run a Scarred Lands stream on Mondays, and every other Wednesday I run a old Drow stream set in the Forgotten Realms. That will probably be coming to a very bloody and terrible future.
What times can people tune in for that?
The Monday streams, the Scarred Lands, is 2:30 p.m. Central, and every other Wednesday on Mondays, and every other Wednesday is 8 p.m. Central.
Gotcha. Okay.
And those are also go up on YouTube and anywhere that you download.
Just drop the link to your YouTube in our chat for people right now.
Yeah, we'll do.
Yeah. So definitely go check that out there.
And then obviously the Onyx Path Twitch channel you can also find me at. Which is twitch.tv/the Onyx Path. I run games there. I Twitch programming there. I'll be running a game there tomorrow afternoon called of Trinity Continuum Core, the action adventure game we were talking about earlier.
Cool.
The momentum system. And it's going to be called Hard Holidays.
Holidays.
Christmas special.
It's our Christmas special. As you might imagine, they're going to be in an office party in a tall building. And we're going to go from there.
Please tell me this is Die Hard. Please tell me this turns into Die Hard. Come on.
Yeah, probably. It's, you're...
Yippee-ki-yay.
Exactly. Yippee-ki-yay, Mr. Falcon.
That's the best dub TBS ever did. Oh, my God.
And then so we've got that running. And then you can find me. I'm at Travis Legge, Legge, pretty much everywhere on the internet. If you search my name on DriveThruRPG, DM's Guild, Storyteller's Vault, you'll find a bunch of my writing. And then obviously Scarred Lands. Buy the Player's Guide. Keep an eye out for Yugman's Guide to Gelspad and Vigil Watch starting early 2020. Those are going to be coming out. We're trying a different model with those. It's going to be interesting. So we're releasing them in alternate bi-monthly sections. So Yugman's Guide will come out. A part of Yugman's Guide will come out in January. Part of Vigil Watch following, so on and so forth.
Oh, interesting.
You can subscribe to both up front. You'll get everything right out the gate as it comes out. You can pick them up piecemeal, decide what you like, what you don't. Or then they'll be bundled up at the end as go back and get them.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, so we're trying to make sure that everybody has however you choose to engage with it, because this material can be used in your Scarred Lands campaign, or you can drop it into your 5e campaign. If you're going to drop it into something like the Forgotten Realms, you might want to dial power levels.
Yeah.
Because Scarred Lands is brutal.
Or just adjust the CR.
Yeah, just adjust the CRs. Yeah, turn the CRs up.
Adjust the CR a little, that's all.
Yeah, and And yeah, if you go to theonyxpath.com, I think starting tomorrow, if I'm not talking entirely out of my tailpipe, we will have our first open development playtest document, which will give you the revised Hollow Legionnaire. In the core book right now, they are one with one set of racial traits.
Mm-hmm.
And I decided I thought it was more fitting thematically to break them out into a core race with a sub-race for each of the spires.
Yeah.
So we're going to try that out and see how that goes. I'm looking forward to hearing people's feedback. And there's also going to be a fighter subclass on there that I think people are going to enjoy. That really delves into the Titanic flair that you can take with some of the characters. This particular fighter subclass gains their abilities from exposure to the viscera of the Titan of Gluttony. So
nice.
It's an interesting thing. I'm really looking forward. I hope everybody checks them out, downloads them, plays them on streams, fills out the surveys we're putting out for them, and we're going to have playtest material rolling out over the next several months.
Definitely keep an eye out on the Discord channel. I know we do have some people that are interested in Scarred Lands, have played it. I'm sure they would be really keen on putting up to stream and getting a little shout out, to kind of promote that up a little bit. Get some people, awesome. Get some more eyes on the game.
I appreciate it.
Speaking of eyes on the game, I know we haven't been seeing the book in front of us here, but when I went by the booth, the artwork is stunning. It is just gorgeous.
It is incredible. I love it. It's like it's like a heavy metal magazine cover,
Yeah.
And I feel confident in saying that if you look at the art that's in like the 5e player's guide for Scarred Lands, that's the look and the themes and the feel that we're going to be sticking with for
awesome.
For Yugmans and for Vigil Watch. So
I dig it. I dig it a lot. Well, that's great. So we got plenty of avenues of ways to find you and those products because they're wonderful. I hope everyone kind of gets into them. We're in a weird holiday season, so our schedules are all kinds of weird. Dustin, what you up to these days?
Well, I got a whole lot of list of places I'm not going to be. So let me tell you where I'm not going to be this week. I'm not going to be here running Terra Tree Fell on Thursday like I normally would. It would be my Thursday in the rotation, but there's this little movie called Star Wars Episode 9 coming out, and if I'm not sitting in a seat on Thursday, then I would have to hand in my Star Wars fan card. So that ain't happening. So I'm there. I already got my tickets. Going to opening show Thursday night, so you will not see Terror of Tree Fell. If you tune into TT2KB, you will see Terror of Tree Fell because I'm probably going to put like all 5 current episodes up on rerun and run them all day long. So those of you who want to watch a little bit of it, see if you like it or not, you can tune in. You'll find that they're running. All 5 episodes, thanks to Jeff's hard work, have been mildly edited and put onto YouTube, mostly to cut out my technical glitches. And after that, you'll be able to find them there, and you can watch the playthrough there of my Zweihander game from Zweihander RPG, Terror and Tree Fell. For the people who have been asking me this week, because this has been coming up more than I ever expected, yes, I am writing it as an adventure path for Drive-Thru RPG. Yes, it'll get done someday. No, I'm not a good writer, and that causes it to be delayed more than I want it to be. So as I continue to run this game, I keep taking some notes, and of course it's up there for me to keep going back and rewatching. So, but I am working on putting it in something that will be on Drive-Thru RPG eventually. I'm working on getting all the NPC player tokens, everything you might need to run it on Roll20, and getting all of that put into it as well. So when you pick up this thing down the road, it's going to not only have the data information, but the maps and the tokens, character sheets.
A wee bit of work to do.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's a little work.
Just a little bit. So it's taking some time, but for people who keep asking me, it is coming. So
very cool. Yeah, and as has been mentioned, we do have a Discord channel that we want you guys to all get involved in. You can come on, you can ask questions, you can try to get on the show with us. You can know when we're doing things. There's lots of stuff you can do. Mostly we just like it because people are able to find other players, share ideas, and share what they're contributing to the hobby. Whether it's art, music, creativity, just a good attitude, whatever. You can go on there and have a great time. So we'll drop a link for the Discord in there if it's not already underneath in the panels where it normally lives. And the YouTube channel, as we described, has all kinds of content. In fact, it has every episode of the Wisdom Check that we've had to date up there in a playlist. We've also got His Terror and Tree Fell, and we will be working on getting the Everstorm stuff up here relatively soon, I will say, and we'll hope that happens. Future content will go there as well. And we're going to be continuing to kind of put out new content. So we're hoping to get some more game nights. So more Vermintide. We're looking at 7 Days to Die. So if you're into that game, we may be doing a little bit of that.
Let's call it. That's going to happen, isn't it?
I hope it happens. I hope it happens. It's going to be fun.
There's none of this maybe bullcrap. Just say it. It's going to happen.
It's happening. It's happening.
It's going to happen.
And so we'll rock that out. And yeah, so it's good times.
See Crazy X in there. He's like, 7 days will happen. You're damn right it will. You guys ain't quit playing the damn thing since you bought it the other day. Come on.
I'm just figuring it out. Yep. Yeah. So that's us, and we are going to be here this Saturday playing our Everstorm game. So hopefully we'll get out of this fight. It's been a doozy. It seems like a chapter ender.
Retrofitted into a Christmas special. So who knows what that will look like.
Yeah. So come and tune in with us for our 5e homebrew game, the Everstorm, which is fantastic. And hopefully none of us die in that campaign. So next week we obviously have holidays. It's a little odd. Did we decide? You guys doing a show without me?
We are. It's me and awesome. Levi. We haven't picked topics yet, but you can guarantee we'll probably talk a bit about Everstorm. We'll probably talk a bit about maps and how Jeff's wrong. Those 3 topics are on the board for sure. After that, we'll see. We don't know. We'll fill that 2 hours. Don't you worry.
Sounds good. So you won't see me. I'll be in Florida. But yeah, we got some awesome guests coming up down the road. So we'll kind of tune in on those soon. And other than that, I want to say thank you so much for joining us tonight. And thank you, Travis, for coming. I appreciate you. Thank you for the incoming raid of 2 people as we're doing our outro.
That's our 3rd raid of the night. Thank you.
It's a lot of raids. It's been great. Appreciate you.
Funny. I was actually just going to suggest we raid Ian, and then boom, he raided us. So I guess we can't raid Ian now. I was just looking over at the list. I was like, who could we rate it? And I was like, oh man, we haven't rated Ian in a while.
They got you first.
That's nice.
First.
But yeah, appreciate you guys and appreciate you. And
thank you so much for having me. This was a riot. And I would love to come back on at some point when we have a little bit more watch and
sure. Yeah.
And Yugman stuff out there for people to see once we've had some playtest stuff.
We're booking season 2 right now. I just finished booking January this morning. Adam Rose from Grim and Perilous is going to be on for our last guest in January. So I'm looking at February, and I'll probably have it fairly booked soon. So whenever your stuff's out, you pick a month, if April, May, whatever's good for you, you just get in touch, let us know, and we'll definitely give you another 2 hours slot to come back and talk more about it.
Will do. I would love that. This has been a riot. I cannot thank you enough for letting me come and nerd out for a little while on your show.
Absolutely. Much appreciated. So thank you all, and we'll catch you next Monday.
Later.
And we do that.